Time to pull up a chair and talk some Dynasty football. I am your host, JJ Wenner, and this is the Rider Dynasty podcast, presented by Gridiron Ratings. Your path to the title starts with Gridiron Ratings. Tonight, we dive into high-stakes leagues, trade strategies, and finally, some great tier-based trade targets for your Dynasty leagues. Joining me is the content director at Gridiron Ratings, the one and only Dynasty Dork, Dave Heilman. How are you doing, sir?
Doing wonderful, man. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to the show.
Absolutely. And our special guest tonight is a great guy and easily one of the top minds in fantasy. He creates for the FF Today, and I had the privilege of watching him go toe-to-toe in the King's Classic Auction Draft. You can find him on Twitter at Doug Orth. How you doing, Doug?
Doing great. And don't thank you for the introduction, and one of the best auctioneers that never auctioned before, apparently, right?
Yes, hopefully I get a second shot this year and I'll do better this time. But that was quite an experience. An experience.
It's
talking about learning. Wow. Some smart minds in that room. But before we jump into the episode, and there's a lot to talk about tonight, do all the typical YouTube and podcast things, like, subscribe, comment, please. It helps us grow and helps us provide you with the content you are looking for. Now, before we start talking about trades and trade strategies, I want to talk a little bit about high-stakes league. Doug is a veteran of high-stakes leagues. That's what he does. And it's a completely different way of approaching fantasy football. And I just want to talk to him a little bit about it. So, Doug, for the newbies out there, what is a high-stakes league?
Well, besides the obvious, I know you mentioned you wanted to know the main differences between a regular league and a high-stakes league, and I think that's the place to start anyway. I suppose one of the main differences I've noticed in quote-unquote regular leagues is that I'm lucky to find more than what I call 2 or 3 independent thinkers. What do I mean by that? Managers who take ADP data or the wisdom of the crowd into consideration, but really, at the end of the day, trust their own convictions. In high-stakes leagues, I tend to believe that number is closer to 6 or 7. You still have plenty of overly conservative managers that will say, well, I remember Zeke Elliott back in 2020. They won't say that, but I remember Zeke's glory days. I'm holding on until I get a 101 or 102 rookie pick for him, and that type of stuff. You're going to find those less in high-stakes leagues because it's either win or don't win, and I know that's very simplistic, but I would say, in short, you're more likely to talk with more sophisticated managers who can talk through their likes and dislikes about players and trades in high-stakes leagues. I think if that doesn't relate to what I just said earlier, I think that the sophistication and, like I said, the independent thinking.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that in a lot of my lower stakes leagues, you do see people who just click on the next name up in the sleeper, queue. You see it very often. Like, people won't scroll down and look. So as far as like the basics, is there like a go-to platform where you do most of your leagues on?
Well, it's been my fantasy league up until now. I'm having trouble finding the kind of leagues I want to play. I'm looking to get more into the $1,000 entries, and those are hard to come by. But I'm looking into full-time fantasy. That's a site that I've come across here in the last few months. That's an option. I don't really want to consider the FFPC because I don't like tight end premium leagues, but there are more options, high-stakes options out there, so potentially. But right now, it's been my fantasy league. Apex runs their leagues through my fantasy league, and so that's where I've been here recently.
And so you mentioned that you're not a big fan of tight end premium. I guess a question I would have, like, do you have a preferred format?
Your general, I think what you would consider your general redraft: 1, 2, 3, 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 3 receiver, PPR. I'm not big into half PPR. I'll do it if I have to, but I just this kind of leagues I would kind of scoring that I would play in redraft leagues is the same kind of scoring I would like in Dynasty leagues as well. Deeper leagues, the better. I have one league that goes up to 25 players. I have another one that goes around 22. I see plenty of them that are around 20. I would prefer the 22 to 25 and deeper than that as far as roster limits, or as far as the overall number of players on the team.
Interesting. Now, so you do high stakes dynasty, which is interesting to me because a lot. I don't know if Dave wants to comment on this. A lot of times you see in a dynasty startup people who just rebuild right off the bat. Right, they're in a rebuild mode. They're going all youth. They're punting that first year. Now, for me, if I'm in a $25 league, I'm willing to punt the first year. But does that, I mean, that has to change, right?
You would think, and I'll tell you, I got into, the reason I'm looking off to the screen here is I'm pulling up a draft that I did the startup from last year. The guy, I was at the 108, so I started off with the 8th pick. The guy right behind me went with his, and granted now last year was a good rookie draft year. He went with his first 3 picks, Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, oh geez, where am I? Basically, I think Trevor Lawrence was another one. He basically took the first round of the rookie draft and applied it to a startup, or it kind of felt that way anyway. And I understand what the concept is, and I'll probably mention this later. When I started playing Dynasty about 10 years ago, I took more of a 4 or 5 year approach. I probably would have drafted more like that guy back when I started. But you look at it, and I guarantee if we have this talk in 2026, we're talking the 10 to 15% tops of the players that we're talking about now, we might be talking about them. So I'm taking more of a 2 or 3 year approach as much as now, granted, if I can find somebody I want for the next 10 years, a quarterback, a young tight end, that type of stuff, sure. I mean, those guys, I value those guys immensely, but not at the sake of, I'm not going to sacrifice the next 2 or 3 years just so I can hopefully get a payoff in 2026. I think I can build great teams now and in 2026. So that's the goal, to always be competitive. And at the end of the day, of course, you want to bring home the money. So.
Now, I know there's a lot of recent news about a high stakes fantasy league that kind of went sideways. Any Tommy Pham, Jock Peterson relevant stories here?
Well, I'd say I wish, but no, I'd rather not know. No, I don't. This isn't going to apply quite to Dynasty, but I do have a story from a fantasy league that I can tell you. And I'll try to make this as short as possible. We were in the fantasy playoffs 2 years ago. Had a loaded team, loaded redraft team. Pretty sure it was a $1,500 buy-in, so somewhere close to a $10,000 grand prize, right? Well, first round of the playoffs, this owner emails the commissioner, says this guy didn't have this player in his lineup for the first round of the playoffs. Obviously, I have proof that I do. Well, he took the other guy aside. I'm out $1,500. So I think that's the shortest way to tell that story. But had he left my guy in, of course, I would have won that week and probably moved on to at least cash in some money. But when the commish, who is handling at least 6 figures, I mean, and at least several $100,000 of buy-ins, he makes that decision, says his software is perfect and all that stuff. That's a problem. So I'm not playing with him anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still a little bit bitter about that one. But yeah, it can happen. It can happen. But it wasn't a high profile site. It was one that I found 10 years ago and had really good customer service and really good experience with up until that time. And then if he's going to make that kind of decision, then I don't have much of a choice but to leave.
Mike Trout isn't the only bad commissioner out there.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. Those minor league Mike Trout back in the day. That's tough, man. That's really commissioning is tough, but if you're gonna be the commissioner, especially in a high stakes league, that's some extra responsibility, and making a decision like that for $1,500. It's like the review that took the Miami Heat's 3 points off the board. Someone needs to check and balance the commissioner.
And I'll just add on to that story. I took screenshots and snippets and sent them to him because I'm thinking, it's a good idea with this amount of money to, right, like the week or two before we started those playoffs, I thought it would be a good idea. I should probably start taking screenshots and just to back myself up. So I sent, and it still didn't work. So his software was perfect, apparently. So, yep.
Wow. So, in these leagues, are people sponsored? Like in a high stakes league, does anybody ever play for somebody else? Like you'll see in like poker tournaments, people are sponsored by different sites. So does like football guys like sponsor somebody?
Not in my experience. But you'll have tag teams, or what I would consider tag teams. You'll have 2 or 3 guys on the team, like a $1,500 team or something like that. But I've never had it. I've never seen it, or never knowingly seen it where football guys or ESPN or some guy. And I don't ever run into the other analyst in these high stakes rooms either. And so you can name 10 or 20 of your favorite analysts, and I don't ever see those guys in there. I do see the Chad. I don't know if you know Chad Schroeder. He goes by Cocktails and Dreams. That's his tagline. Apparently, he's made over $1 million playing fantasy, and I do see him I do see them in my leagues every so often. But yeah, anyway, to answer your question, no, I don't see them sponsored.
Interesting. Dave, do you have any questions about high stakes?
Yeah, that was kind of one of my biggest ones. Just wondering if somebody was out there just kind of being the Seabiscuit, and people are paying him to play and things like that, because I know that happens a lot in poker. And then the question, and I don't know if you want to answer this one or not, but what's the highest what's the highest either grand prize or buy-in that you've played?
Highest buy-in, I don't want to go higher than 1,500. I think at that point, I've seen buy-ins for 5,000 or 10,000. Look, you need 1 or 2 major injuries. I've had teams, and now we're talking redraft here. I've had teams where I've lost 4 of my first 5 draft picks in that year. I don't, for 5,000, that's a pretty substantial ouch. Yeah. So I'm not saying the 1,500 isn't, but I can swallow that a little bit easier than the 5,000 or 10,000. I mean, if I get that in a $10,000 league, I'm probably not returning the next year because I've got to go make that money somehow. Yeah. So, but yeah, 1,500 is what I'm comfortable with, and I'd have to make a lot more money doing this before I would consider going higher than that, just because I think volume is where it's at. But I don't mean volume in 25-degree buy-in or $25 buy-ins. I mean volume as in, let's start at 500 to 1,000, and where I win one of these and do moderately well in the other 5. Okay, well, that's still a good year type of thing.
And with that, do you diversify your portfolio, not invest a lot in the same players?
I feel like I created that phrase. I would dare you to go back into time, and I feel like I was one of the first people, if not the first person, saying diversify in your portfolio, because certainly there are players that you're going to be attracted to more than others, but I know we talked earlier via Twitter. I didn't necessarily mean to go all in on Allen Robinson last year, but that's kind of what ended up happening. And now I'm glad I did it. Last year kind of sucked, but I mean, I had the teams that could kind of withstand that too. Having said that, I've been much better for him to be a wide receiver 1, and then I would have probably taken home, a little bit more money. anyway, life goes on.
Makes sense.
Now, a couple questions. Do you have anything with like high variance players? Are those the type? Do you avoid those players more often? Like, do you look for guys with like higher floors, or is I know your system. You've told me your system, especially for wide receivers, which I thought was brilliant. But I mean, how do you approach a draft?
Okay, so yeah, obviously in like a best ball scenario, I don't play best ball dynasty. I don't play best ball a lot in general. Uh, Obviously, in that situation, I would look more toward high variance players. In dynasty, in high stakes leagues in general, I'm going for the high floor guys. And look, I'm greedy. I want high floors and high ceilings. Okay, so I'm going to continue going that route as long as I can until I can't anymore. But at the end of the day, somebody like a Nick Chubb appeals to me, for example. And do I think that the eventual return to Sean Watson could actually end up helping him? Sure, but I think he's going to remain a high floor guy, and with the promise that maybe Watson may get him to 40 catches here in one of these next couple of years, type of thing. But to answer your question, I try to avoid high variance guys for the most part, but it all comes back down to team construction too. If I have three rock solid guys at one position, then give me the high variance guy, sure. Because it is like building a stock portfolio to a certain degree, or like building a mutual fund. You need some stability to go in with your high risk and your low risk.
So transitioning over to trade strategies, right? Um, does you talked about the more independent thinkers? You're
Yes.
able to more clearly evaluate players. Your owners definitely have a more solid understanding of what they think of their players. Does that help you in making trades?
Yeah, I guess it's all a matter of perspective. I mean, if you know you have a league full of what I'm sorry to say non-independent thinkers, then you can just go to a trade calculator or to ADP and say, okay, I'm guessing my guy here at 25 is going to appeal to this guy at 29, and let's match up needs type of thing. But um, and I would say this is definitely the case more so in high stakes leagues where you're targeting a certain player. So earlier this spring, I was targeting AJ Dillon. I didn't get him because ultimately I was being asked for a 2023 first. I didn't quite want to go to that. That was part of it. That was part of it, really. And I like the incoming class, or what was looking to be the incoming class of rookies for next year. So I kind of like to hold on to that at least for now. But yeah, lost my train of thought here. Oh, so go ahead. I'm sorry, lost my train of thought here.
Oh, no problem at all. So I guess for me, I'm a terrible trader, right? I listening to like the Trade Addicts podcast. They all talk about being a trade addict. I am not. I am terrible at trades because I don't know how to start a trade. So
Okay,
how do you start trades? Like, is there a message, then an offer, then a message? What is your approach?
okay. So I have one main approach. Buckle your seatbelts here because it's going to take a bit for me to explain what it is. I don't think it's anything revolutionary, but I do want to. I feel like it. I would rather give you too much detail than not enough. My preferred approach is take an inventory of what each of the teams in the league need before anything else. I'm not focused on necessarily who I want to trade at that point. I'm focused on what the teams need. I want to evaluate the other 11 teams in my league. Not only does this save time in seeking out trades, but it can be helpful in deciding who your competition is for certain positions on the waiver wire during the season. One of the worst things any fantasy manager can do is decide it is time to trade someone and just plainly send out offers. I'm not. That can be offensive sometimes, depending on who you're talking to. if you don't invest any time in trying to find a good fit, why should you expect someone else to do it, right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So once I've taken inventory, then I have to determine if any of the players on my block fulfill their need. I understand that sounds relatively elementary, but I can't really skip that step in my explanation here. After that, I think the next thing I do is what differentiates me the most. Because I rarely know these guys. 95% of the people I compete against, I've never met. We're not talking like Canton here. We're talking about guys that are living in Seattle or North Dakota or New Mexico, stuff like that. So, like I said, I reach out via email and try to begin a dialogue. And the comparison or the visual I want to set up here is, imagine for a second that an actual NFL GM making a trade offer to another GM without talking to him about it first, right? It's kind of the same thing here as far as I'm concerned. Sure, your first offer may get it done, but wouldn't it be better if both sides were happy? It also sets the stage for more deals down the road. Furthermore, there's always a chance the other manager will offer you a trade that completely blows your mind in a positive way. And I want to give you a quick example of that. Last offseason, so during the 2021 offseason, I reached out to a fellow manager about Jerry Jeudy. Among other things, I was trying to get rid of Melvin Gordon before it was too late and was ready to move on from Mike Gesicki. Without getting too far into the weeds here, I didn't land Jeudy. What I did do was I got Allen Robinson, who I like more than Jeudy, Irv Smith, a rookie pick that became Travis Etienne, and a player who I turned into Elijah Moore. And the only guy I really departed with that I really didn't care to part with was Michael Pittman Jr. That set the stage, obviously, for me to do some things with that team. So I already had McCaffrey, and then I picked up the 101 in another trade for someone Najee Harris. So now I've got Najee Harris, Christian McCaffrey, and I'm at least 2 or 3 deep at every position, just because these are the things I do. And just you reach out, you kind of have an idea of what you want your team to be, but just like I said, you don't just send out an offer hoping that one gets accepted, because you never know when that sweetheart deal might come down the road.
Dave, what is your approach to trading?
Well, it starts off similar, as Doug mentioned, where, I'm not someone that's just going to go, well, I want this guy from Doug's team, so I'm just going to offer that trade. I'm going to look at his team and see, if I was the owner of his team, what from my team would help him.
Yes.
And so, of course, all my best players are probably what's going to help him, right? But I'm looking, all right, he's got no starting tight end, and I got 2 tight ends. He's got, even in a 1 quarterback league, his quarterback is weak. I can throw that in as a sweetener. And so I'm looking at things like that and going, if he's got 2 starting running backs and no depth, I'm not going to target his 2 starting running backs in a trade. Unless he's a rebuild team, that just makes no sense for him, so it's a waste of my time. So hey, Doug, what's going on, man? I'm looking to make a move. Is there anyone in my squad that you're interested in? So-and-so is on the trade block. It looks like you might need a tight end. He says, yeah, I like this tight end or that tight end. What's it going to cost? All right, well, hey, I'm interested in blah, blah, blah. So I'm before throwing an offer, because the last thing you want, the worst feeling in the world, you send an offer and it's an instant accept. You're like, I overpaid. So I'm letting him come to me. He says, hey, I really like Dallas Goedert. I really like Zach Ertz or whoever it is. Allen Robinson. All right, cool. Well, I really like Hunter Renfrow. What do I got to, where do we go from here? And that's how I do it. But I'm really, it's kind of the same thing as Doug. I'm looking to get the deal done. I'm not looking to rob people.
Right.
And I don't really care about winning the trade. If the trade chart says Doug wins by 5 points and I get my guy, cool. An extra third gets this done, Doug. Like, that's one of my favorite lines to finish a deal. They send me a deal that I know I'm going to accept. Hey, if you throw a third on there, I'll accept it. And they say no, okay, cool, I'll still accept.
Right.
Or, but I get those thirds and fourths and just kind of little extra draft capital, because they really don't mean a lot to a lot of people.
Just want to add this a little bit onto what you said. I think that's great what you said. I think one of the worst things that you can do in a trade discussion, whether you start it or whether you are on the other end, you're receiving the email you're on the receiving end of the discussion, is someone asks you, what would you take for player X? And your answer is he's untouchable. No one's untouchable. Don't make anyone untouchable, because you get to the players you want by acknowledging that all your players are available.
Yep.
And you're saying before, I didn't want to imply, and I don't think I implied that you're looking to rob anybody, because that's not how you continue to make deals down the road.
No, you didn't.
So, but now if you started that conversation off, let's take the most obvious one: Jonathan Taylor's not available. Well, I was going to offer you 3 first. Now is he available? Oh, maybe he's a little bit more available now than he was. So, but if you put that on the table immediately, you're not going to have these ultra aggressive alpha owners say, well, you know what, I bet I can talk you out of it. Hey, he said he was unavailable. Trade discussion over before it started. Don't close doors. Don't close doors before they potentially open.
Yeah, and you definitely did not. But one thing I think, going along the lines of just continuing to, there's only 11 players you can trade with in your league.
Right.
And there's probably 2 or 3 guys that maybe are like JJ that are like, I'm a good drafter, I'm a terrible trader, and I'm not. Like, there's people that are not active. Like, I have a guy that absolutely loves our Dynasty league, and the first 2 years made 0 trades. He got a little bit more active after that, but I was like, man, how is that fun? I'm like the person that trades 100 times. But yeah, nurturing that relationship, trying to make sure this is and don't offend somebody. Like, you can offend somebody by being like, hey, JJ, I can tell your team's in rebuild. What can you sell me? And they're like,
my team's in rebuild?
Yeah, like, what? So that's another way you can offend somebody. Hey, I'm going to turn this light to get the Dallas Cowboys situation going on right now.
Yeah, we actually, Doug, when we were getting ready for this podcast, I was thinking about an article you wrote last year. One of my biggest pet peeves in trading in Dynasty, one of the reasons I don't like trading, is when you negotiate with an owner. Right, I think you called it the old okey doke. You're negotiating with an owner. You seem to come to an agreement on a trade.
Uh-huh.
All right, you send it over, and now you're back in negotiations again.
Yep.
Like, this has happened to me 3 times during rookie drafts, and it drives me nuts. Is there a way to get out of those situations? Or is it just you're done once you're stuck in that?
My experience is that you're done. I remember that particular conversation, or that particular story. I tried to change, or I tried to negotiate that offer, I think, in 3 or 4 different ways over the course of like 3 or 4 days, which is almost unheard of, at least in my experience. And each time it was, he was very reactionary. So the news came out about this guy, therefore now he's with this, and my guy is still crap. That type of thing. Yeah, that, especially in Dynasty leagues, those are the ones that you kind of take a note of, and it seems like every league you have about 2 or 3 guys that your teams either mesh or the owners really mesh, and then it's this guy that we're talking about, who your teams mesh, but the owners don't for some reason, or maybe he's. I've heard this excuse a lot. Well, if I trade you this guy, then you're going to win the league. Well, yeah. It's kind of why I'm interested in him. So, yeah. So, yeah. I'm glad you referenced one of my articles there, but yeah. I don't know that she can do anything about that other than, because those things usually are born out of desperation, and you're usually the one that's in the desperate situation, especially if they continue to change the terms of the offer. you're just at that point you're negotiating in bad faith, or they're negotiating in bad faith, and it's just, I hate to say it, but it's probably not worth your time with them.
Yeah, I've definitely had that myself, and I just have the honest conversation with them, like, hey man, I thought we had a deal. Don't really like where this is going. We can either go back to the original offer, or we can just you know be done with this. But I don't like that you keep bait and switching me, or that you're like, hey, how much is Michael Pittman? And then we start talking about Michael Pittman. Next thing you know, we're like, will you throw Najee Harris in there and Jamar Chase? And it's like, we're talking about Michael Pittman a second ago, and now we're shipping off Jamar Chase. I'd like to focus back on Pittman, unless you're going to make a serious offer.
This particular, I'm sorry, Jake. Go ahead, Jake.
No, go ahead, Doug.
This particular, my reference to that in that story was about Kadarius Toney, because I was really trying to get Kadarius Toney on this team, and we started off, I want to say, like on a Thursday, and it was player A, player B, and then either Toney or some other receiver. So he was basically like a throw-in at that point. By the end of the weekend, Toney was damn near untouchable. That's
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
No, at that point, it's just fold them.
Yeah.
Well, now it seems to me, right? I everything you're saying always takes me back to one of the great goats, right, of fantasy, Leo Sega, right? I think that's how you say his last name. He's the guy who always talked about his notebook. He had gone away from fantasy for a little bit. He's just poking his head back in, releasing some articles. But Leo's big thing was he kept a notebook about every league, about every owner, and about every team. And just wrote down the notes, right? What people like. What kind of moves do they make? Do they trade picks? What are their tendencies? What are their tells? And it was all in an effort, because what you're all saying is it's all about building a relationship with somebody in order to trade, right? It sounds just like me and my wife, right? Like you try to build a base, you try to like negotiate fairly, right? But it's all about open and honest communication. And that's really what Leo pushed a lot, is just really, really studying, like you were saying, Doug, about looking at every team in your league, not going to a website that automatically ranks every team, but doing it yourself and really grading out each team that you're about to negotiate with, and try, like Dave said, to meet those needs, right? Fill in each other's gaps. I think they said that in a movie somewhere. I'm not sure which movie that was.
You complete me, that kind of thing.
Oh, I thought you were saying that. I was actually moved for a second, Dave. My cold middle school teacher heart melted for 1 second. All right, gentlemen. Now that we have some strategies we can try out, why don't we tell the listeners some moves that they can help make this offseason to help their dynasty squads? So we're going to talk about some different level of trade targets that you can go after. Doug, who is your main trade target this offseason? Or one trade target?
Yeah, we'll go high end here. We'll start high end. Because I go high end, mid level, and then low end. Okay. So I don't know how much success I'm going to have doing this, but Saquon Barkley. And so I'm going to ask you to think about every excuse you hear people use with Barkley. Most common one is injury prone, right? Okay.
Yep.
First of all, I don't believe in injury prone players. When people use the term injury prone, it makes it sound like his body's not built or ready for football. I don't think we can say that about Barkley, right? And it almost makes it sound like an illness or a sickness. Oh, don't touch him, he's injury prone. It's football. These guys are going to get hurt. Now, some guys get hurt more than others, but I don't. To me, that doesn't make you injury prone. That makes you succumb to the rigors of football. That's not. To me, those are two different things. Another one is his offensive line. While I'll say there is some merit to that during his NFL career, having bookend tackles for the first time in his career with Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas is definitely going to help. Play calling is another. I think we can all agree that the combination of Brian Dable and Mike Kafka is a huge upgrade over Jason Garrett from the last 2 years and Mike Shula the previous 2 years. I also think Daniel Jones is mobile enough to keep the weak side pursuit from crashing in on Barkley, and that's important for a guy like Barkley because he's juking and jiving, and he's going to be behind scrimmage a little bit more than, say, any running back in the Kyle Shanahan system. I mean, their goal is to straight line until they see a hole. So I don't want to make it too simplistic, but zone running is more about not being so creative and being go where the hole is and burst through it, right? Is that fair to say? Barkley, you're not going to want Barkley to probably in the zone blocking system because that's not what he is. He's there. He makes you miss, and then he uses his 230 pounds to bully you once he gets through the hole. So, anyway, having somebody that understands it, like I'm sure Dable's going to understand that Jones is mobile enough. Hey, if you want to crash down on Barkley, I'll run Jones out the backside and have him run for 20, 30 yards. Teams aren't going to do, or defenses aren't going to crash down very much anymore after that. So, anyway, I don't want to get drawn on too much about Barkley, but we've already heard about how he's going to be used more in the passing game, and that again is kind of a fault of the previous coordinators. We saw what he did his rookie year with I believe it's 91 catches. I don't think he has that many since, or if he has, I know it has to do with the injuries. But you look at the lack of competition for touches in that backfield. Can you name another Giants running back?
Well, they
have last year.
I'm a Giants fan, so I can, but most people will not be able to name Jay Sean Corbin and Matt Breida and Antonio Williams, those guys.
So, I mean, can you see Breida getting 2 or 3 touches in a game? Sure, but, I mean, for the most part, it's at least this year. And look, if Barkley has anything resembling, let's say he has 200 carries in 80 catches. You don't think that's going to play in the free agent market next year? You don't think that he's going to find a sweet spot for himself? I'm not saying he's going to make $10 million a year. I'm saying that his situation could be even better than it presumably is this year. And again, that's what you're doing in Dynasty, is trying to look at it.
What would you be willing to give?
Well, I know what I've tried. I have a league. I have one of my more prominent leagues. I have Nick Chubb and Ezekiel Elliott as my 2 main running backs. I'd like to hold on to Chubb. I would consider Elliott in 2023 first for Barkley. I haven't quite made that offer yet because I still want to hold on to that 20. I'd rather do anything right now but trade that 2023 first. But having looked at that guy's roster, I don't think he's interested in my receivers, just because as we're starting to see here in the last couple of years, receivers are, I don't want to say dime a dozen, but my God, there are a ton of good receivers now. Yeah. And now on that team, I have Devontae Adams, Allen Robinson, and Mike Evans. But if I was to look at his roster, I think he would go 3 deep with at least wide receiver 2s. And I know I've talked to him about Barkley, and he's not interested in moving him right now. So
looking at the DLF trade finder, I put in, just to look in 12-team PPR leagues. Barkley has recently been moved for the 1-8 and 2-8 in rookie drafts. I would do that.
Yes.
For James Conner in a 23 second.
Yes.
Now J.K. Dobbins and a 110.
That's a harder decision. I think I still would.
And the last one was interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
This year's, yeah. I'm sorry. I was going to ask the stupid. I didn't think my question through, but yeah, I would still do it. Sorry, go ahead.
And then a Giants question, Dave. Saquon and Kenny G for the 115 and a 23 first.
The 115?
Yeah, and a 23 first.
Yeah, it really kind of depends on the situation of the team, but yeah, I think the value's on the 23 first side. But 115, and then this is a 16 team league, and I'm getting 115, and then the 116 next year. That makes it a little different. I don't know if I love that one. Maybe if I'm a rebuilding team and I'm trying to get out from under Barkley. I have a rebuilding team and I sold off, but I got the 106, and then I got at the 106 like a 301, and then a high second next year for Barkley.
All right. Well, Dave, who is your first high value trade target?
Rashad Bateman. With Rashad Bateman, you're gonna have to pay up. People know, and sometimes you just got to go get your guy. Everyone wants to do the buy low. Like, you're taking a risk, and with Bateman, I feel like it's less of a risk. They moved on from Marquise Brown. They moved on from Sammy Watkins. Brown was the second in snaps. Watkins was the fourth in snaps. That's 779 and 382 snaps. Rashad Bateman's going to be on the field a lot, and that's 144 and 49 targets. So that's 200 targets, and yeah, he's not going to get all of them. And I do understand that targets are earned, but this is a guy with first-round draft capital, alpha receiver build, and in this offense, yeah, it's going to be maybe a smaller pie because it looks like they're going to go back to the running game, but he's going to get a big piece of the pie. And and as far as it's going to be him and Andrews, and if I'm looking for someone to be a breakout candidate, I want someone that's going to be one or two in targets. And volume is a great predictor of success, opportunity, and so I think Bateman is someone that I would trade. And so what I saw, and I want to hear what the trade finder found, was it would cost about a top 4 pick in this year's draft or a mid 23 first, and I'd pay it.
Yeah, it was an interesting mix of trades. It was I saw one straight up for 23 first. I don't know where it's going to fall. I saw him traded straight up for Nick Chubb. Don't know how I feel about that one. I saw him traded him and Matt Corral for 23 first, second, and fourth. And then him for Tannehill and Allen Robinson in a Superflex league.
Okay. I would do the last one. He's a younger prospect than Robinson. Yeah. I do like Robinson. Tannehill's an older quarterback. Would definitely not do that one before that you just mentioned because Corral brings nothing to the table as far as the value, and you're giving your entire 2023 draft class for Rashad Bateman and Matt Corral. That's insane. I can't remember the first one.
Just the 23 first, and then one for just Nick Chubb.
Doug didn't like the Nick Chubb one. No, 2023 first is borderline. I'd have to take the inventory of the team I'm trading with and see how I felt about that team's chances. If I'm thinking front end of first round, maybe, because I think about guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba, for example. Mm-hmm. If he lands in a good situation, I want that, and I'll take him over Bateman, who you've highlighted as positives. I don't have that many negatives on Bateman, but we're also not talking about Michael Thomas. We're not talking about 2020 Michael Thomas either.
Yep.
So he will have a ceiling where you get, just like I said, Smith and Jigba in the right situation, or he was the only one that came to mind. But I know this next class is supposed to be
Butte. I mean, and if obviously, there's some, Bijan Robinson. There's some sick running backs. So yeah, if I like what you said with that, because a random 23 first. What I got here was a mid 23 first. If it was me, a mid 23 first is what it said on the value chart, and I would accept that, mm-hmm. but not an early first. Right. I would definitely accept a late first.
All right, Doug, do you have a mid-tier target for us?
Well, if you folks have been paying attention, and I know you have, but I've already mentioned this guy a time or two, and Dave did too. So my boy Allen Robinson, And I know he's a bit on the high end when it comes to age. He's going to turn 29 in August, so he's a little bit high on the high end in terms of age to players I want to trade for. But I really don't mind making an exception in his case because his game is less about speed and quickness and more about size and strength. First of all, it's easy to forget Robert Woods was somewhere around depending on your scoring system, was somewhere around the wide receiver 12 when he got hurt last year. I know we're looking at more than just this upcoming year. Just hang with me. But Robert Woods was somewhere around the wide receiver 12 when he got hurt last year. I know it was a bumpy road for him at times to get there, but I tend to believe that was in part because Woods and Cooper Kupp were very similar in terms of what they brought to the Rams offense. Then let us take into account what Odell Beckham did when he started seeing regular snaps in weeks 12 through 17. He was the wide receiver 13 over that stretch, and he didn't have the benefit of learning the playbook or learning much of the playbook. So I'm not necessarily always one that says follow the money, but we know from the Rams contract that they plan. It's not just Robinson didn't accept a bargain basement deal. He's going to be a part of the offense. So that also helps me ignore the age slightly. Okay, Robinson also never recorded an ADOT, and I don't get usually too much in the advanced analytics, but he never recorded an ADOT higher than 12.7 in Chicago. That was his first year with the Bears when he had that. But he had one of at least 13.7 in his final 2 held years in Jacksonville. And I'll say with some degree of certainty that Robinson will stretch the field with the Rams and steal more. And then hear me out on this one, okay? So he'll steal more than a few of Cooper Kupp's 37 red zone targets, 13 of which were TDs, and 18 looks inside the 10, 9 of which were TDs. All 4 of those totals were the highest across the league. Robinson's being brought in to not only complement Kupp, but he's going to get, I'm not going to say half those looks, but even if he gets a third of those looks, and then that a third of those looks plus whatever Woods and Beckham would have gotten by themselves, right? Robinson's going to push for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, and I can see that being the case next year too. And what did I say before? I'm looking 2 or 3 years down the road. If I can get Robinson cheap and then get and lock in close to 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, sign me up. Last but not least, Matthew Stafford has already established he does not mind trusting his receivers, particularly the big ones, even if we don't count Calvin Johnson for a second because of his unicorn nature and focus on Stafford's recent past. Kenny Golladay and even Marvin Jones mostly thrives with Stafford. Robinson's a more established talent and, at least in my mind, a better talent than either of those players. And the last thing to keep in mind is those Detroit offenses were not as good as the one Stafford's playing for right now.
Yeah, some trades that I saw, Allen Robinson made me excited to go out and try to get Allen Robinson. Juju Smith-Schuster straight up for him. I would do that.
Uh-huh.
A 2-8.
I'll trade for Juju right now just so I can get Allen Robinson.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, Allen Robinson for the 2-8 and a 23 second. I'd pay 2 seconds. And straight up for Gabriel Davis. I would do that one too.
Oh, all 3 in a heartbeat.
All day, right? Like smash. So, yeah. Yes, I agree, Dave. Gonna go grab him right now. Dave, mid-tier.
Yeah, so mid-tier, I put Kareem Hunt. So if you're competing roster, you want to get as many good running backs as possible, and hopefully Hunt is your 3rd or 4th. But with Hunt, in the first 5 games or 6 games last year, with a healthy Nick Chubb, he was still averaging over 13 touches a game. There's guys that don't even average that as starters in these committees. He had 9 touches, 14 touches, 16, 17, and 17. And what if Hunt got traded this offseason? What if he landed in Houston? What if he landed in one of these teams after an injury? He's someone that has some upside. What if Nick Chubb went down? He's got upside, and what I really like about Hunt is he's got a role even when Nick Chubb's there. So you could see a situation where Deshaun Watson is there. He plays all 17 games, and the offense is obviously better, and there's more opportunities for scoring. The situation where Deshaun Watson's suspended, maybe the whole year, maybe half the year, they're going to lean on the running game. You're going to see more of this 15 touches. And for Kareem Hunt right now, he's the trade chart says a mid to early second round pick. If you're a competing team, you would much rather take your shot on him than a guy like Alec Pierce or something like that you're going to get in the early second round. So, and he's 26. He's not like this 30-year-old running back that you're going and taking a shot on like Cordero Patterson or something like that. He's not a J.D. McKissick where he's kind of just that guy. He can be a workhorse, and if something were to happen, he's a high-value handcuff, but he's got standalone value as well.
Yeah, some interesting trades. Somebody you talked about earlier, Doug, in a trade. Irv Smith, straight up for Kareem Hunt.
Ooh.
I'm not a big believer in Irv Smith, so I probably would do that. LaVisca and Xavier Woods, IDP League, for Kareem Hunt.
I don't know how to value the IDP guys at all.
Ignore the safety. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Straight up for Shenault.
I know I'm in a draft right now, and there seems like there's like 45 safeties, so I would take the trade.
All right. So you would give up Shenault for Hunt, and you would give up Irv Smith for Hunt.
Yeah, I probably would send more because that's not even a fair trade. Like I wouldn't even send that offer.
Which just goes to show if you're not in a high stakes league, send an offer.
Yeah, and they were talking about today. I was listening to Fantasy Pros, and sometimes you just don't know what's going to be accepted, and that's why, like Doug said earlier, it's good to not blindly send offers out there. Like I got a guy in my DMs last week, like, what do you think about this? I'm like, I probably wouldn't offer that, and he's like, well, what about this? And I'm like, listen, I mean, if you can sell Marcus Mariota for a second round pick, do it. What I'm saying is I would never pay that, and I probably wouldn't offer that. Like a third is a good, fair offer. He's like, oh, I got it done for a second. And like turned around and got like a similar trade done than the other day. Like, and I'm just like, okay, I can't believe these people are accepting your trades. Like, no offense, I'm not trying to say you're robbing people, but man, you're winning these pretty handily. Like, who are you trading with? Your 5-year-old cousin? Like, what's going on here?
Well, they might be trading with me because I make some silly trades. I did trade. I don't know how I feel about admitting this. The 2-6 in a super flex. I have no quarterbacks for Jared Goff.
And is Jared Goff
I was.
Is Jared Goff going to be your? Is going to be your like second quarterback?
He's going to be my second quarterback.
Okay.
Probably.
Okay. I thought you said you had no quarterbacks. I don't know. I thought you said you had
I have quarterbacks. They're just like Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, for a 2-6, you're gonna miss out on Willis and Pickett and say the rest of the class. I'm not particularly high on. I could wrap my mind around that. I'd rather get a year or two of Goff. Other than I did not like Ritter, Corral. Maybe he's got a chance. He can't run like he did at Ole Miss, or he's not gonna last.
Yeah.
Well, shockingly, Ritter had already gone in the first round of that rookie draft.
Jeez.
Along with Pickett, and Willis went right before I went with the 2-6.
Yeah, and he's got a more secure. Most likely going to be replaced next year, but he's got a more secure position than if you were to spend that second on a Marcus Mariota or spend on a Mitch Trubisky or something like that. So, I mean, I'm fine with it. One thing that I always want, obviously you want quarterbacks in Superflex leagues, but I think it's very important that people know it's a Superflex league. You don't have to start a quarterback there. And, Jared Goff happens to be the example, but I had a trade where I gave up Jared Goff and I got AJ Dillon. This was 2 years ago before like kind of the hype was going on, and Brandon Ayuk. and I threw it out there on on Twitter and just say, hey, who won this trade? And they're like, whoever gave Jared Goff got destroyed. And I'm like, what? Like he's on the Lions, and like my response was, do you even think he's going to be a starting quarterback next year? Which he is. But I'm like, I just, there's times last year where you really wanted to start Goff because he was pretty solid the first half of the year. Second half kind of fell off, but again, I think it's fine. 206 is a lot better than the 111 or 201.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, gentlemen. Well, we are up against it. I want one more trade target, but we have to do a speed round. You have like 1 minute to sell me your trade target. Doug, low end trade target.
Low end trade target, Deontay Foreman. I think I'll skip the obvious part of it, and I think will acknowledge that he's the most likely handcuff there in Carolina. But my attraction to him would be that. Okay, so you remember back at the end of the Ron Rivera era, there was aging Jonathan Stewart and there was C.J. Anderson. They were trying to, compliment him, but then it just became obvious that McCaffrey is McCaffrey. Well, Matt Rule wants to run the ball. He made it clear all last year he wants to run the ball. Cam Newton's no longer there, or at least we don't think he's coming back for another shot. And he was doing most of the short yardage and goal line work back in those days. So what you're looking at now is somebody they want to take a little bit of work away from McCaffrey, and then you don't have Cam Newton take the short yardage stuff anymore. Sounds like a perfect place for Deontay Foreman to step in and get. And the comparison I made was discount Mark Ingram near the end of his first stint with the Saints. I think that there's a possibility that he has that kind of value.
Interesting. One of the trades was Mark Ingram and Tony Jones for Deontay Foreman. How prescient.
Well played.
412 straight up for Foreman. I would do that.
Wow. Yep.
A 23 third.
That's fair.
I would do a third. Yep.
If I have McCaffrey, I would definitely do that.
Yes.
All right. So those are the trades. Dave, your low end target.
Yeah, so this guy had 169 and 54 snaps walk out the door. He is worth an early third-round pick, according to the trade calc. And weeks 12 through 18, his targets were 6, 7, 4, 5, 6, and 6. And he had 5 TDs in 5 games, and his name is Alan Lazard. I forget where he was in the ADP. It was like 96, wide receiver 50. He was worse than that. I mean, you can get him for nothing, and if he ends up not doing anything, that's fine. But Rodgers trusts him, and I would say he's going to outscore Christian Watson this year for fantasy production. He's the best run blocker on the team. He's going to be on the field a lot, and I think it's worth the value of early third.
Well, I'm going to make you very happy, Dave. He recently went for a 304. Somebody traded Lazard and the 311 for a 309.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Straight up for Jacoby Myers and straight up for Diami Brown.
Yeah, I'll take him over all those guys.
Lazard is cheap. Gentlemen, it is now time for tags. Time to let everybody know where they can find you and anything you are working on. Doug, you are up first, my friend.
I keep it simple. You see my name there on the screen. It's at DOUGORTH, and you can find me on Twitter. And of course
Dave.
at FF Today. Yep, go ahead.
And you can find me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram at Dynasty Dorks, all one word, capital D's. Thanks for having me on.
Special thanks for Dave for helping producing the show. Thank you to Doug for joining us tonight. Make sure you are following him. He is old like me. That's why he has his name as his Twitter handle. He's at Doug Orth. I'm at JJ Winner. Be sure to check out Gridiron Ratings Draft Guide, available at our website. Getting Defensive, we're doing a 4-round IDP mock tomorrow night. Next week on Rider Dynasty on Wednesday, we have Justin Barnes joining us to do a draft strategy pod on IDP and offense leagues. From all of us to all of you, be safe, be well, and as always, boat drinks, my friends, boat drinks.